Although the recommended macronutrient ranges for cutting and gaining are similar, there are some subtle and important differences. When you're in a cutting phase of any kind, you're always going to have to rob Peter to pay Paul in some sense. You'll be forcing yourself to either not get enough protein, carbs, or fat simply because you don't have enough calories in your budget. So we'll need to be a bit more cognizant of how our macros are set during a dieting phase to protect against lean body mass losses, to improve adherence, and to maintain gym performance. As I mentioned earlier, protein only contributes a small amount to energy expenditure. But during a diet, this amount increases for several reasons. The first is that greater levels of activity increase protein requirements, and most dieters add cardio into their cutting program in addition to their weight training. Secondly, protein is used more for fuel because less fat and carbs are available due to the caloric restriction we're creating. And lastly, also because of the decreased carb and fat available, more glycogen and body fat are utilized. As their stores decrease, the body is forced to rely more on protein as an energy source and becomes more efficient at using it. However, this increase in efficiency often does not prevent losses of muscle mass, especially in lean individuals, even when weight training. Fundamentally, whether you gain lean tissue or not is determined by the combined factors of muscle protein breakdown and muscle protein synthesis. If breakdown surpasses synthesis, the loss of lean tissue occurs. If synthesis surpasses breakdown, the creation of new muscle proteins occur. A common theory is that during periods of energy deficit, muscle protein breakdown increases, outpacing synthesis, resulting in the often observed losses in lean body mass. However, published data points out that the primary culprit causing a negative protein turnover ratio may not necessarily be the increase in breakdown rates, but rather a decrease in muscle protein synthesis. There's also a fair amount of data showing that the leaner you are, the more likely you are to lose lean mass while dieting. So the question then becomes, could it be beneficial in some way to consume a higher protein intake while dieting than you usually do while maintaining? Could this overcome the suppression of muscle protein synthesis or suppress muscle protein breakdown when dieting, which could result in better retention of lean mass? The general consensus in the literature is yes. However, there are still theoretical arguments both for and against the possibility that higher protein is beneficial while dieting. At this stage, we don't have the data to confidently know how it all plays out. But to be safe, most protein researchers currently advise consuming higher protein in the range of 0.7 to 1.2 grams per pound, or 1.6 to 2.7 grams per kilogram of body weight while dieting to offset body protein losses and help preserve muscle mass. And while it's difficult to say with certainty that those efforts will result in the muscle retention we're looking for, some researchers have acknowledged that intakes as high as 1.1 to 1.3 grams per pound or 2.5 to 3 grams per kilogram would not be harmful or counterproductive. There's also evidence that intakes in this range and even a bit higher may be more satiating, as they tend to reduce energy intake and may positively affect mood state compared to lower intakes. For all these reasons, combined with our 3DMJ coach's experience, what probably makes the most sense for protein intake while dieting is somewhere between 1 and 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, or 2.2 to 2.6 grams per kilogram. For further insight into Eric's research on this very topic, check out the references section in the final chapter of this course. And as a final note, the only exception to this guideline is for those with obesity. If a large proportion of your body mass is adipose tissue, it can result in an inappropriately high protein intake if you use the calculation we just mentioned. In which case, our other co-author on the Muscle and Strength Pyramids, Andy Morgan, came up with a nice workaround. You can use your height in centimeters as a gram target for daily protein. Unless you're under 5 foot 2 inches or over 6 foot 4 inches, the number you get will likely fall nicely within the recommended protein range. Let's start with our male avatar. If you'll remember, this guy is 200 pounds, which is about 90 kilos, and needs approximately 3,000 calories to maintain his current body weight. As discussed, our recommended range for protein is between 1.0 and 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, or 2.2 to 2.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So using pounds, 200 pounds times 1.0 is 200 grams, and 200 pounds times 1.2 is 240 grams. Using kilograms, 90 times 2.2 is 198 grams, and 90 times 2.6 is 234 grams. Using the pounds calculations, his recommended protein intake range while cutting is 200 to 240 grams. Using the kilograms calculation, it's 198 to 234 grams, essentially the same. Let's move on to our female avatar. She weighs 140 pounds, which is about 62 kilos, and needs approximately 2,000 calories to maintain her current body weight. 140 pounds times 1.0 is 140 grams, and 140 times 1.2 is 168 grams. 62 kilos times 2.2 is 136, and 62 kilos times 2.6 is 161 grams. Using the pounds calculations, her recommended protein intake range while cutting is 140 to 168 grams. Using kilograms, it's 136 to 161, essentially the same again. As you can probably tell, while the pounds and kilograms are not 100% exact in their comparisons, it's important to remember that your body isn't either. When we say our male avatar's body requires 3,000 calories at maintenance, that means some days he requires 3,800 and others 2,700, but the average is around 3,000. Similarly, saying the top end of his recommended cutting protein range is 240 grams versus 234 grams really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Human bodies are not perfect machines, and neither are the scales you use to measure your food or your body weight. These are recommended ranges for our best guesses at constantly moving targets and should be treated as such. So with that first calculation out of the way, let's move on to carbs and fats.